feel comfortable speaking my native language in public.
I'm Vietnamese, and the reason why I feel like I disagree with that statement because a lot of my peers back in high school, like Vietnamese, get made fun of a lot, and the environment that Vietnamese is used in my high school is very like they call it like a market. It's like a lot of cussing and a lot of just the way they talk isn't very like conversational. It's more like derogatory or just making fun of one another, and it's not. So that's why I personally don't feel comfortable speaking my language.
My parents' proficiency or lack of proficiency at English has affected their education in America or their like job prospects.
So I grew up like deep in the Midwest. I was born and raised in Minnesota. So everyone there is white. Like my high school is 99% white. So my parents like trying to get jobs and like education, like further their educational careers. It was hindered greatly by the fact that they had accents and like this very whitewashed community. So one struggle that my parents bring up constantly is like we wish we could speak English better in the way that like white Americans can understand more easily.
For me, so my mom got most of education in China, but then she got her PhD here in Florida. So I think like for her, it wasn't as much of a struggle because she did get to go to school in America. But for my dad, he mainly got his education in China. So when he came here, like just to like follow my mom, he like had a hard time finding a job, and so he's like a real estate agent, and so most of his clients are like Chinese or Japanese because he learned Japanese in college. English is like difficult to work with when he's working with clients, so like I'm kind of like in between.
I feel pressured to use a nickname or a different name for my birth name.
So here you go. So my full name is technically Vikram, but that's the name that is on my birth certificate. But my parents realized that many people wouldn't be able to pronounce it. So they kind of just cut it in half and made it like Vikram, and they made Aditya my middle name. But even then, some people will be like, oh, Vikram's too hard, and then they just change it to Vic. So yeah, so sometimes people just call me Vic.
I'll also speak on that. So when my parents were picking a name for me, they specifically chose like very Americanized or like white names. So like they were deciding between like Rachel and Emily, and they ended with Emily. So like they specifically chose a name for me that like wasn't like from my culture because it would be easier for me growing up.
Celebrate cultural holidays.
I come from China actually, so for me I celebrate Spring Festival, which is like the biggest festival for Chinese.
Mm-hmm. For me, what I was thinking about is like, so I was born in America, and so I celebrate like both like American holidays and also like Chinese holidays because I am Chinese. So like from both perspectives, yeah.
For me, we don't celebrate like Lunar New Year, which is objectively like the most important Korean holiday. We also don't celebrate like Children's Day or like all these other major Korean events. The only thing that we really do is that we'll eat like special dishes on like our birthdays or things like that.
So we'll do events, we'll like celebrate the events, but like I won't always know the significance behind them. Like we'll play like Holi or we'll do like Diwali or something, but I won't always know like the stories or the specific details of the stories or like the morals that go behind them. So then it becomes kind of like something that I'm like kind of going through the motions of, but I don't necessarily completely understand.
I feel like I don't know enough about my native culture.
I'll talk about it. I wasn't completely sure actually, like if I disagree or strongly agree. And I think if I had been asked this question before I came to Rice, I would have just said like I disagree or I'm neutral. And I think the reason why it's changed is it's kind of like this weird dynamic when you meet international students who come from like the country of your parents' origin. And so in like comparison, so like relatively, I feel like I don't know as much, and I think there's like that weird, there's that weird identification where I'm not really sure if I identify more with like American culture or like Korean culture, and it's like they like these other students know more about like this heritage that I want to identify with, but not really sure like how I can or like if it's possible. I guess like at this point.
Well, I'm not from Asia. I was born here and I was raised here. So I feel like being an Asian American is my cultural identity more so than being strictly Asian. So I don't think it's fair to say that knowing more about my native culture only implies Asian culture. I think that my cultural identity is Asian American, and so I'm satisfied with that.
People have made negative remarks about the ethnic food I eat.
Most distinct memories from preschool was when I brought like shredded pork or like roast song in Mandarin to school, and it looks kind of hairy, and so like one of my friends was just like, "What are you eating? Like, why are you eating that? That looks disgusting." And I was like really insecure about it for a long time, so like I stopped bringing that, and I started bringing like PBJs and stuff. so.
I'm neutral because I think I've had a good mix of both sides. Definitely growing up, I always brought my lunch to school, so I'd bring leftovers from the night before, and so that would usually include rice and a bunch of other stir-fry dishes. And sometimes my friends would definitely like comment on the smell or perhaps how it looked when I was microwaving my food. But then at other times, like my best friend who was white in high school would always eat my food because he thought it was so
I feel pressure to take on a certain cultural identity in different situations.
In high school, I was embarrassed of being like Vietnamese, but so I just kind of like distanced myself from that group. But now like coming into like college and hanging out with like more of my peers who are like-minded Vietnamese American, I'm now like a lot more proud of it, and so I talk about it a lot more. I talk about food a lot more now, and so. Yeah, different situation. I agree with this. And I do act like how Vietnamese I am in different contexts.
I can say something. I think Patrick said earlier that he regards his culture as being like Asian American, and I really agree with that. So I never really felt like I had to accentuate one side of that. I just kind of regarded it as one thing holistically. So I never really felt that I had to change that in any situations. But that's just me.
So I'm interested in going to a career in law, and recently I started interning at the federal courthouse, and there are like networking events, and just I think like ethnic makeup of that specific professional field is not very conducive towards me like often really celebrating what I think is like what identify like being a Korean American, specifically like certain traits about being a Korean. It's just like not the most comfortable community, and so a lot of times like when you're making small talk, they'll like reference like certain cultural things that I just never really grew up with, and I feel kind of like an outsider in those situations.
I have like a super distinct memory, 8th grade, right before we read To Kill a Mockingbird. My teacher like pulled me and a black student aside out of class and was like, "This is a very like racially charged book," and I like came with like prior knowledge that like this story would be about like prosecution of a black man. But then she like tried to connect with me. She's like, "Oh, I'm a 16th Japanese. Like I totally understand what you're saying." And like that's like the moment where like really solidified like to these people I'm just like a token minority that like is expected to feel certain ways. So to kind of fulfill that, I felt like throughout high school I like had to be the role of like the voice of like the minority person, which was like such an uncomfortable position to be placed in because I'm like I don't know the experiences of like, for example, like a black man like living in like the city. Like it was just weird, and I felt like throughout high school and like growing up I like had to be like change like the amount of like ethnicness about me to like fulfill the role that these white people expected of me.
There was one time, so for like Diwali, it's kind of a common thing to like decorate your porch. And so something that we do, we put like a swastika on ours. And there was one time where it was the day right before Halloween. We still hadn't cleaned our porch yet, so we had a swastika on our porch. And then no one came, like I was sitting at the door with like candy, but no one came to our house because they saw the swastika. They kind of associated it with like Nazism. And so I just think I can see how like at that point you would want to like I saw that like it would have been better if like we hadn't put that there, because then people would have like not associated us with like, you know, the Nazi group. And so like there can be like different cultural like inconsistencies, I guess, in how you like express yourself.
When I was younger, my parents helped me with homework.
I tried, and they weren't very helpful, so I stopped asking.
I think I'm in the strongly agree section because my parents grew up here, went to college here, so they kind of had an understanding of the American education system. So, yeah, like it was easier for them to have that connect with me.
Yeah. I can speak on that. I'm a first-generation student, and my parents are both from Vietnam. Their education level stops like before high school in Vietnam. So, in terms of like helping with my homework growing up here, there was little to none because they couldn't help. And applying to college was the most terrifying part because being a first-generation student and my entire family, they didn't know what rice was. They didn't know how college worked. So it was just like me blindly figuring out with like my peers or people who would help me. But for my parents, it's just they have unconditional support and love for me, but it's just like they couldn't help and they didn't understand much of like, let's say, the financial application process and all the other stuff. That was like hard to deal with.
So I'm also a first-gen student, but I have a slightly different experience because both my parents did grad school over here, even though they were both born in China. And I also have 2 older siblings, so like they learned through them like what the college process was like, at least applying to college. And so like it wasn't just like, so like the cultural factors didn't really matter as much by the time they got to me. It was more so they already had like previous experiences.
So when I was like applying to colleges and stuff, my parents were like pretty aware of like the process because I have an older brother, and they like definitely like wanted to be involved in that like they like wanted me to like get into a good school and like to go to, like to succeed, and like I specifically didn't let them involve themselves because I wanted like whatever my like final destination, like my attendance at a university, to be like my decision and like my...
I feel comfortable talking to my parents about my personal problems, such as my love life.
Wait, was it comfortable or uncomfortable?
Comfortable.
Oh.
So growing up, I don't think my parents really asked me much about a lot of my personal stuff. The main things they were concerned about were my health and how well I was doing with school. I also had an older sister who I could kind of talk to some things about, but I grew up pretty reserved in terms of personal things. And so I think as I've gone through college, I've come closer to my parents and am able to talk about personal stuff that I never talked to them before, but there still is a little bit of that distance.
Yeah, growing up, my parents were mostly focused on, I guess, education. So we never really talked so much about our personal lives and our desires and our dreams. But me and my brother, we got older and we started to reach out more to our parents. And it took a long time. Like he's like 26 now, and I'm like 22. It took about like 10 years for them to like open up. So I can talk about anything to them. I mean, I don't, but I don't feel awkward if I do so. Yeah.
I can relate a lot to his story. My parents were very laissez-faire, and being the youngest of 4 boys, like by the time it got to me, it was just like whatever. I was like black sheep of my family. Really didn't talk much to my parents and family, but ever since I got into college, and like even though I live in Houston, I'm only like 30 minutes away from them, but this like nice little oasis gave me like a good distance enough for me to like visit them enough to like actively engage in sharing like being like complained about school and relationship. So like that part, me telling them like me being comfortable telling them about these stuff is just like it was me like forcing myself to just talk to them more because I just know that they, even if I'm not talking about school, they just want to know how I'm doing, and I think it was just me like making sure like they know that I'm okay.
So like my parents don't explicitly say it, but they have a lot of expectations for like who I'm dating. So they don't like specifically explain it, but they expect me to like date like a Korean girl. So if like my dating life doesn't necessarily fall into those two categories, I don't really feel comfortable expressing that to them because I know that they wouldn't be like very accepting of that.
My mom and I are like best friends. I told my mom like everything, and we have each other on like Snapchat too, which I know sounds weird, but my mom is like also really chill, and I think part of that is like a two-way street for us. Is that when I'm like open to her and tell her like, oh yeah, like I'm going out tonight, then she's just like, oh yeah, just be like safe, and just like text me if you like need anything, which is like really different than I think what a lot of college students have with their parents. It wasn't always like that though, and I think one thing that really kind of changed the way my mom and I interact is, I used to live in Edison, New Jersey, which is kind of like an ethnic enclave in the United States. There's like, I went to a school that was like 45% Asian American, which is kind of crazy. And so we were just like always surrounded by a lot of people who shared like really similar cultures. And so when we moved to Texas, it was a really big shock, and that's why we like came closer as a family. And just like over the past few years, some of the stuff that's like happened like within our family has also brought like my mom and I a lot closer. And so we talk about literally like everything, which is like, yeah, but my mom is like really my best friend. We talk about like relationships and like what I'm going through. I tell her like all my friend drama, like she loves hearing about it. She loves like gossiping with me. And it's even better now because I can talk about my mom. I can talk about like what it feels to grow up as like an Asian American, and my mom has actually like really similar experiences too because a lot of our family is still in Korea. So she feels disconnected from like her homeland, even though, and like she distinctly recognizes that she appears like more American to like our relatives whenever she goes back. So like being able to like share that with my mom too is also really nice. And I'm like getting kind of closer with my dad, but I just like connect better with my mom.
My accomplishments or my lack of accomplishments have been affected by my race. Like the way that
so like at my high school, I think it was about like so at my high school, I'm from Ohio, and my high school was about like I think like 8% Asian Americans. So, like there was like still a reasonable population, but like not very significant. And like growing up, like if you were like an Asian kid, like the expectation was like, oh yeah, like you're of course like gonna be really smart or something. And so like I was put in a lot of like social situations where like I was expected to like know a lot of information, or like people would like look to me as like the token Asian who was smart. And so like I feel like that affected like my own like other people's perceptions of me, which then like kind of like perpetuated like other things and like what I would do. And so like even like in the situations I felt like I had like a lot of imposter syndrome, like oh like why are you coming to me, like I might not be the best person for this, but just because like everyone around me thinks like oh like I'm smart because I'm Asian, then like I would get put into like positions, or like I would approach things differently because of that.
I can understand why other people's perception of you might be affected by your race. But when I hear the word accomplishment, I think things that you do that are a function of the work you put in. And I don't see how other people's perception of me has directly or indirectly affected something I was able to do purely as a function of the effort I put into it. So I have to disagree.
Maybe the experience that I had, or the accomplishment lack of thereof that I've had, is it is dependent on like the field or career that I'm in. Like let's say like competition is always like math or like science, but it's never like English, because like when it comes to things like that, I would say that it's not because I'm like Vietnamese American, it's just because that English is my second language, and it's like a lot of a struggle for me to like even write a simple essay or things like that. But I feel like the other accomplishment that I've had, it's all because like Patrick says, because of like how much work you put in, and it's not because like you're Vietnamese American that I couldn't do this or I did that because I am Vietnamese American.
For me, I understand that like my race has played a major part in like virtually every aspect of my life. Like everyone sees me and they see me as an Asian woman, and that has been like the first impression that these people have had of me. And like not to play into oppression Olympics, I understand that even though I am an Asian American woman, I have had like immense privileges. Like I have parents that are incredibly attentive to my success, and that has greatly propelled me to like the place that I am now. I'm at a private institution that is one of the best places, like one of the best places to study in like the entire world. So again, like being an Asian American has affected me greatly, but I also have all these privileges that like are undeniable to like where I am today.